right? Another CDC data point. This is in a recent study that came out in the last 2 months. The largest risk factors for death for COVID with COVID-19 were obesity, and then number 2 was anxiety/fear related disorders. So given these 3 data points directly from the CDC, why have our public health experts, the media, and the government officials kept us in perpetual fear? If anxiety and fear related disorders is the number 2 risk factor for death, and then further, why is it that we have not heard any information, any education or resources poured into or money poured into lifestyle, nutrition, or mindfulness?
Thanks for listening. If you like the candid discussion and are seeking the truth behind the mainstream narrative, then please subscribe and share. Not only am I grateful, but those who seek the truth and wish to empower themselves and their family's health, freedoms, and future will also be grateful. Hey, I'm live here with my good buddy and brother, Alec Zeck. I almost said Dr. Alec Zeck, and part of that is because this dude has a photographic memory, and when we start rapping, you're gonna see he just starts going off. So, thanks so much, Alec, for being here with us today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. Like you kind of said this before the call, or maybe you said it when we were recording, but you're like a brother. Like you feel like you've known each other forever, and like we've only been in person together a few times now, and I like it's there's no like awkward, like, hey, how is it going? It's just right into deep conversations all the time, and it's so refreshing. And that's what's been a blessing about everything that's happened with COVID, is connecting with people like you across the country has been amazing.
So, Alec, I was blessed to be able to speak with you at our Health Freedom Revivals. That's when we met. I wasn't doing a lot of social media at that time, and our good friend, Dr. Lona Cook, had been following you. So she introduced us and obviously got you to Wisconsin to help impact our communities. So the backdrop is we may have many listeners who know who you are, but for those that don't, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you came from, how you got to this point, and then we can talk about your podcast as well.
Yeah. So I feel like I need to buy a house in Wisconsin by now with how many times I've been back to speak in Wisconsin, which is a great thing. I love being there. Y'all keep inviting me back, which is so kind of you. But so how I got involved in this space, sort of truth-seeking / natural health / health freedom space, is by experience. And there seems to be this like accepted narrative amongst those people who think, that we're crazy conspiracy theorists, that we just woke up one day and decided, I'm going to speak on one of the most controversial topics that there is, lose a bunch of friends, lose a bunch of family, have society paint me as crazy, lose job opportunities, have my medical license threatened for those that are in like any healthcare profession. That seems to be the accepted narrative. But the reality is people come into this space because of experience. That is the truth. They come into this space because of experience, and that's the same with me. So I grew up in an abusive household. My dad was sort of just repeating patterns of generational abuse and trauma. And my mom was very codependent and more focused on fixing my dad than she was, parenting us. So on top of the abuse, there's also neglect there. And then from a young age, I was taught to sort of outsource my self-worth because I didn't have any, because I was made to feel like I was, am I allowed to cuss on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it.
I'll keep it minimal. I won't go Billy DeMoss on us. just a little bit of cussing. I was made to feel like I was a worthless like piece of shit growing up because of the way that I was raised, right? Like if I didn't perform in basketball, then my dad would beat the shit out of me, right? Like it was that type of abuse and always in my face, calling me names and what have you. So I was made to feel worthless. And so I learned to self-externalize from a young age because I didn't have any internal self-worth, right? I sort of like fractured my personality, if you will. And obviously I'll get to the point where I've healed a lot of that. But so because of the abuse that we experienced as a family, when my dad went to rehab when I was in 8th grade, my mom went to go see a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist didn't discuss anything to do with like trauma healing, anything to do with, nutrition, mindfulness, didn't even, want to venture into anything that she had experienced that led to her coming to see the therapist. It was just a 10 to 15-minute discussion. And then she was prescribed multiple benzodiazepines and SSRIs thereafter. And over the course of the next 10 years, my mom's health spiraled. And when I say spiraled, like it was like more of like an up and down trajectory, but like the downs kept getting worse and worse and worse. And like she would show sides of herself where if she'd be up in her up moments, we were like, oh my goodness, the drugs are working. Yay. These experts are practicing, quote, evidence-based medicine. We're right. And then in her down moments, and when I say down, I mean like not leaving her room for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, hallucinating, just sitting in front of the bathroom mirror, picking her skin, staying in bed for multiple days, but then other days like not sleeping at all for like 3 to 4 days at a time. Had multiple suicide attempts in and out of psych hospitals. And we thought, oh my God, the drugs aren't working. She needs to go back to see the expert, the doctor, to get more drugs, to try different drugs. So that's what happened a lot too. Like would cut cold turkey off of one, start another, which is awful, like shocks your brain. And that was our experience for, 10 years. And it finally got to a point, and luckily like one blessing, one of the many blessings about how I was raised is I was raised in a very authoritarian way where, again, it was all performance based. So I was like forced to get good grades, right? Because otherwise I would come home and there'd be a lot of issues. So I was smart enough to get into West Point. So I did go to West Point, and then I commissioned into the Army right after that. And as I was graduating from West Point, again, my mom's health at the lowest point ever. And by chance, she goes to see a therapist. And this therapist happened to be reading this book called A Mind of Your Own by Dr. Kelly Brogan. And this therapist said to my mom, like, hey, I'm reading this book that just came out around a month ago. And Dr. Kelly Brogan has a practice in New York. I recommend, you've tried a few other things. I recommend you go try to see her. And in the same weekend that I was graduating from West Point, also in New York, and my mom came up there after my graduation and went to go see Dr. Kelly Brogan. Had you looked up Dr. Kelly Brogan at that time, and especially now, you would find on Google, any Google search result, that she's a anti-vax conspiracy theorist that spreads misinformation, practices pseudoscience and quackery, right? That's what you'd find on her. And so my mom went to go see this so-called pseudoscientific quack. And Dr. Kelly Brogan said, Allie, you are not bipolar. You are not depressed. You're not any of these labels. They're meaningless. You have trauma. These symptoms that you're experiencing are a manifestation of the trauma, which is the underlying cause. And then you've added the psych drugs on top of that, which are making it worse. They don't work. I'm a psychiatrist. You can trust me if we're trusting the experts, right? I had practiced previously with psych drugs for a long time, and now I don't use them at all. I practice very holistic approach. So we're going to change the way you look at food. We're going to change the way that you have to actually take steps to heal your trauma and address those emotions. You need to, look at food as a source of medicine. You need to be more mindful. You need to meditate, do coffee enemas, which was a little weird for me back then, but now I'm a huge fan. Just all of those things that now I have come to understand are what really brings you healing, because in a matter of 4 to 6 months, my mom was reversing all of her symptoms. And again, the trauma was surfacing for the first time because she had always stuffed that down. So she was having to heal all those emotional things that she just sort of stuffed away. But she wasn't, in a state of psychosis anymore. She wasn't hallucinating anymore. She wasn't having to go to mental hospitals and be in a psych ward anymore. And we're seeing a side of my mom, her beginning to heal for the first time in nearly 10 years. So that put me into a huge state of cognitive dissonance. And then my wife, who I had just married at the time, 9 years prior, was diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, and she was under the care of multiple rheumatologists. Again, experts practicing, quote, evidence-based medicine, right? And after seeing my mom step away on sort of the mental side of things and heal, we decided, let's just try the same thing with you and see if it works. So we started tapering my wife off of all of her lupus and rheumatoid arthritis medications that she had been on, multiple immunosuppressive drugs over the course of 9 years, seen multiple rheumatologists, right? Started adopting this holistic approach to health. And in a matter of like 4 months, my wife was tapered off all of her lupus and rheumatoid arthritis medications, was not on any of them, felt better than ever. So she was like, let's schedule an appointment with my rheumatologist and go like see if there's anything to verify like whether this is actually helping. So we scheduled that appointment, go to her rheumatologist, get her blood work tested, and the ESR, the inflammation levels in her blood, are normal for the first time in nearly 10 years. And of course, this doctor didn't seem to really care. Like he was like, how are you doing this? And we were like, oh, we're not on any medications anymore. He was like, okay, looks like you don't need me anymore. Like not really showing a care that like, wow, this person completely reversed everything I said she would never be able to, that she'd have to be on these drugs forever, is no longer on them and is doing better. You'd expect someone to, want to look into that. But those two situations, obviously, tons of cognitive dissonance for me, because I thought, how are these so-called experts, have they been so misled? Like, how have they been so misled by the system? And then these people, everyone are calling crazy conspiracy theorists and pseudoscientific quacks and what have you that are spreading misinformation. They're the ones that have healed my mom. They're the ones that have helped give my mom and my wife the tools to heal. What's up with this? So then from that point in 2016, right when I commissioned the Army, I began obsessively researching, and I've sort of never looked back. And then also healing my own trauma. As I saw my mom begin to heal, I finally recognized, like, wow, Alec, you have trauma that you've been suppressing as well. You don't know yourself. You're self-identifying with all these other things. So that began the journey. And then COVID hit, and I had never really spoken out about any of this before. All the knowledge that I accumulated is sort of keeping it internal. But once COVID hit, I felt too convicted and I had to begin speaking. So I began speaking, and a lot of people began resonating, and now this is what I do.
You're great at it, brother. You are in your niche. The best thing I can say in your story, and I love the way the prelude was that, or you prefaced it, was you don't do this because you want to be in front and destroy your credibility and lose your friends and be judged as a conspiracy theorist, which incorrectly phrases the truth, which is conspiracy analyst.
Mm-hmm.
The fascinating thing is, obviously all this stuff is turning out to be accurate. So I love it. The path you're on, unquestionable. Presenting with you, phenomenal. And I love your photographic memory, whether you think you do or not. So let's dive in, knowing that history, on what you know and where these contrasting questions are. This diabolical narrative that runs behind this whole thing. So what's on the top of your mind, as we were just sharing with research currently, that's got you juiced up?
Well, there's a number of things, right? I guess like to start, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are already familiar with the pseudoscientific fraud that is vaccine science, and that is quite literally what it is. It's pseudoscientific, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. But they're specifically speaking to the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, that we know that we know that it is an experimental technology, right? And they always respond to that with, oh, mRNA technology has been studied for years. We've studied it in cancer patients. This has been in development for 25 to 30 years. What do you mean this is a new technology? Yeah, I don't know if it's ever been used with a specific intent of generating a synthetic spike protein in human beings. This is the first time that is ever being done, right? So that's first off. Anytime anyone says, oh, this is not a new technology, yes, it very much is. And then the other piece that people don't seem to understand is that the primary efficacy endpoint in the clinical trials of these shots clearly expressed that how they determined that it was effective, the efficacy of the vaccine, was whether it reduced symptoms of disease, right? Which anyone knows the allopathic medical system, of course, they're like parading around a product that all it does is reduce symptoms of disease, but does not get to the root cause as the solution to all of our problems. So that's what it was effective at doing. And how effective was it at doing that? How effective was it at reducing symptoms of disease, right? So you have the clinical trials. We keep on. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to stop for one moment. Let's reiterate something that many miss on this, because you're so versed in this and you've discussed it so many ways. What is the difference? Please share the difference between SARS-CoV-2 and actually COVID-19, and the fact that we're talking about symptoms versus a.
Correct.
Go ahead.
So, okay, just like HIV is a supposed virus. Now, I said supposed, and I'll tell you why here in a little bit. The supposed virus that causes AIDS.
Yeah.
SARS-CoV-2 is a supposed virus or the alleged virus that causes COVID-19. COVID-19 is purely a series of symptoms. I think it'd be ridiculous to deny that anyone has COVID, right? Because COVID is a series of symptoms that you can verify by looking at someone with their eyes. In some cases now, you test positive for SARS-CoV-2 and are labeled a COVID patient, even though you don't have any symptoms. But nonetheless, COVID-19 is a clinical, you can observe someone with COVID-19, that they have symptoms of what would have been associated with COVID-19, these series of symptoms, right? So
Perfect.
I think you're wanting
Thank
me to go from there on
Yeah.
the distinguishing point between the two. Okay, so the reason that I referred to vaccinology as a pseudoscience is because the foundational science behind vaccines is virology. And virology, by definition, is pseudoscientific. Pseudoscience, the definition of it, is anything that does not follow the scientific method but claims to be science. Virology has never conducted proper control experiments and has never validated their foundational claim. And I'm going to use an analogy to explain how, because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, what do you mean? Like, there's an entire field of science surrounding this. We know the virus exists. We've isolated it hundreds of times. We've genomically sequenced it thousands of times. What are you talking about? I've seen pictures of it everywhere. How could you possibly say that this doesn't exist? And this is the context that people are missing. When you hear someone say that SARS-CoV-2 doesn't exist, it's true. At least per the available evidence, it is true. At least SARS-CoV-2, if you're defining that as a pathogenic disease-causing agent that is passed from person to person, that has never been proven. SARS-CoV-2 is a byproduct of a cell culture. Yeah, that has been proven to be true because you can see pictures of it. And this, I'm going to use an analogy to explain what I mean. So if I were to try to break down, or if I were to try hypothesize that a ping pong ball could break down a brick wall, logically, I would need to see that ping pong ball breaking down the brick wall. Of course, if I hypothesize that, I would need to validate that foundational claim by observing that happening, right? Mm-hmm. So if I were to take a giant mallet and just smash the brick wall several times, and then I'm to take a ping pong ball and tape it to a giant boulder and then throw it at the brick wall, and the brick wall breaks down, have I proven that the ping pong ball caused the destruction of that brick wall? No. I think any logical person would be like, absolutely not. Like, you had to do all those other things, weaken the brick wall first. You had the ping pong ball attached to a giant boulder. Of course, you didn't see the ping pong ball break down that brick wall. You have not validated your foundational claim in the slightest bit. So how does that relate to virology? So any of you listening to this or watching this, you can go look this up for yourself. Look up any virus isolation paper on Google. Just type in, look it up on PubMed. There's tons of papers that are going to come up on the isolation of SARS-CoV-2 from X patient in X location or from this thing or that. And what you will find is the methodology goes exactly like this in every single case. They take unfiltered snot from a sick person, and in that snot they have, in any sample of sputum from a sick person, snot, semen, blood, spit, any fluids from a sick person, you will find millions of RNA, DNA, toxins, proteins, food particles, red blood cells, white blood cells, a bunch of junk inside this unfiltered snot, right? They take that unfiltered snot, put it on a monkey kidney cell, known as a Vero cell culture. Alongside that unfiltered snot that they've put on the monkey kidney cell, they put on cytotoxic antibiotics like gentamicin and amphotericin, and sometimes they also put on trypsin. And if you look up gentamicin, toxic kidneys, just type in those keywords on Google, or amphotericin, toxic kidneys, you will find a number of articles describing how these two drugs are very toxic to kidneys. So they're putting that toxic drug, toxic antibiotic, onto the kidney cell alongside this unfiltered snot. Then they also put on Delbeco's modified eagle medium and fetal bovine serum, which they say are food sources for the cell. But relative to other cell culture experiments they do, they decrease the nutrient intake of the cell. So again, they're putting all these things onto the cell culture, and the methodology of this so-called virus isolation experiment, they're putting all of these things onto the culture, onto this monkey kidney cell. It breaks down, experiences what is called a cytopathic effect, where it breaks down into a bunch of fragments. They use an electron microscope and take pictures of the fragments and say that those are viruses. So, relating back to my example, they have put a bunch of things and like weakened the brick wall prior to throwing the ping pong ball, which is attached to a giant boulder at the brick wall. And they're saying, the ping pong ball caused the destruction of that brick wall. What's worse, though, is that we can see the ping pong ball. You can look at the ping pong ball. Worse with virology is that they presuppose that there is a virus inside that unfiltered snot. They have never even validated that. They've never shown that there is a virus in that unfiltered snot, and then they presuppose that there is one, introduce it to the cell culture, the monkey kidney cell, alongside those other things where they're effectively starving and poisoning the monkey kidney cell. It breaks down into a bunch of fragments, and those little fragments that it breaks down into after it's been starved and poisoned, they say that those are viruses, and those are the same things that are now replicating itself that came from this snot that was introduced to the cell culture that is inside a sick person. They've never validated that there's snot inside a sick person, and then they just assume that because they make the assumption that there is a virus inside that snot from a sick person, that it's been introduced to this cell culture, that is the thing that is causing the cell to break down, and not all these other ingredients that they've added in. And to further prove that that is completely pseudoscientific is that they've never done control experiments. Although ironically, when this method was developed in 1954 by John Enders, who discovered the so-called measles virus, or said he did this method to, quote, discover the measles virus. And those fragments, he said, those are measles viruses right there, or virions, like little viral particles, right? But he also said in 1954, when he did that experiment for the first time, that I've never done the proper control experiments for this, so I don't know whether the other ingredients in the cell culture are causing the cell culture to break down, something to that effect. So why is this important, right? Because in order to ensure that it is actually that the infectious material from a sick person and the virus inside of it, first, they never validated the claim that there is a virus inside of it. But second, they didn't conduct the proper control experiments to determine if it was the other ingredients. Except for now, Stefan Lanka, who is himself a virologist, has done those proper control experiments, meaning that he took the same exact ingredients that were introduced to the cell culture, except for he did not include snot that they assume has the virus from the sick person, meaning he did not put that onto the cell culture. He put the amphotericin, the gentamicin, the fetal bovine serum, the Dolbeck's modified eagle medium, put it on the monkey kidney cell, and it broke down, experienced a cytopathic effect in the exact same way. So relating it back to the experiment with the brick wall, he did the exact same brick wall experiment, except for he never even had the ping pong ball involved, showing that the brick wall, when it's smashed with a hammer several times, and then there's a giant boulder thrown at it, it breaks down regardless of if that's present.
What's the most cost-effective, most affordable, and portable way to get into infrared sauna technology? Therasage360.com. Use code FSDW360 for your discount today. Delivering results that last.
Regardless of if the infectious material is present in the experiment still has the exact same effect, which is a control experiment, which is science done properly on virology for the first time. And so then the response to this is, hopefully people are able to keep up with me on these analogies. The response to this has always been, okay, well, maybe the cell culture itself is flawed, but we've sequenced this virus thousands of times in patients all over the world. We have the genomic sequence of this virus. We have the full sequence. It's been done thousands of times in different patients all over the world. It lines up to be the exact same. It's very clear that there's a pathogenic virus causing disease. So in phase 2 of Stefan Lanka's control experiment, and again, all this will be published in a medical journal here soon. In phase 2 of Stefan Lanka's control experiment, actually, let me back up. How they do the genomic sequencing of SARS-CoV-2 is this process here. I'm going to break it down in layman's terms, and everyone, please don't blindly trust anything I say. Go fact check me on any of this. You can go look and do it yourself. So the initial genomic sequence of SARS-CoV-2 went like this. They had one patient sample who they deemed to be sick with a new virus, right? They took that one patient sample and extracted 56.5 million fragments of RNA from that patient sample. And remember back what I said, in any sample of snot, there's going to be tons of genetic material. So this RNA could be coming from anything. Nonetheless, they take those, every piece of RNA they can find, except for they only take the short fragments of RNA. Any longer strands, they just throw out. They only take the short fragments. They then have a template of SARS-CoV-1 and a genomic sequencing computer program, and they take this 56.5 million fragments of RNA and template it and basically reconfigure, piece it together to match the SARS-CoV-1 template. So then they generate 1 million possible outcomes that could match this SARS-CoV-1 template, and they arbitrarily choose the longest one, and they say that this is the genome of a new virus. So how they came up with the variants, Delta variant, Lambda variant, all these variants that we're hearing, they take that new template, the new SARS-CoV-2 template that they just built in the computer program, and they do a new patient sample, extract the RNA from that patient sample, do the full process templated against the new SARS-CoV-2 template that they had just built with the first patient, and they say, this one is 98% similar. This is a variant of this virus. Here's the new variant. This is the Delta variant. This is the Lambda variant. This is the Delta plus variant. That is how they're determining the variants. And yeah, it's very easy to say, well, Alec, like you're not a scientist, you're not a geneticist, you're not a virologist. Like, how do you know? And my answer is because a virologist by the name of Stefan Lanka has done in his phase 2 experiment. He has built the exact same 100% similar virus genome of SARS-CoV-2 using a sample of yeast grown on a cell culture, meaning that he never had a patient sample of snot, and he was able to use the same genomic sequencing process, use the same PCR amplification process that they use in discovering the new genome, and he was able to get 100% of the SARS-CoV-2 genome with no snot present that they suppose has the virus in it. And I want to add one more thing, then I'll stop talking and let you ask a question. So when you ask a virologist to present you one single paper that validates their foundational claim, meaning you ask them for one paper in which a virus was isolated, purified, characterized, and sequenced directly from the fluids of a sick person, meaning that they actually took a virus out of the fluids without doing the whole cell culture nonsense that I described earlier, they cannot produce one paper. And when you press them on why can't they produce one single paper in which this was done, not only for this virus, but any virus in history, never been done. Why can't you produce one paper that validates your foundational claim? They either say that the virus is too weak to isolate and purify directly from the fluids, which is so funny because in the same breath they say that it's too weak to do that, but then they also say that a virus travels freely through the air, is able to land on a surface, survive on the surface for multiple hours, make it into your body, make it all the way to a cell, break into the cell, hijack the cell's machinery, and then begin a replication process that overwhelms the body. So the virus is strong enough to do that, but too weak to isolate and purify. And we've isolated particles that are smaller than viruses. Glyphosate particles are smaller than viruses. We isolate and purify those all the time. So they say that, or they say that there's not enough virus present in the fluids to isolate and purify it. I don't understand how there could possibly not be enough virus present in the fluids when this is supposedly a pathogenic disease-causing agent that is causing illness and death in millions of people and has flipped the entire world upside down. What do you mean there's not enough virus present in the fluids of a sick person who is sick with this so-called viral illness? So that's my whole spiel on why virology is at the core of pseudoscience, which means vaccinology has to be pseudoscience because it's based off of virology.
Alec, there's so much in there that and anybody who's outside looking in cannot fathom the magnitude of how obvious this is to someone like yourself who asks questions. So they're caught up in the fact that they can't acknowledge the malice, I said it earlier, the diabolic, sinister nature of this whole process, because it's just unfathomable that this would even go on if it weren't real. If what you're describing arguably is so simple and so rudimentary that can't be correct. Come on, it would change the whole world and everything they're doing. And yet I know it to be true because this is the process of distortion that we have right now in medical research. We know medical researchers have and editors of these journals. I can't rattle them off right off the top of my head, but maybe it was New England Journal of Medicine, the British Journal of Medicine.
Marcia Angel, she was a chief editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. That basically said that essentially, and this is not going to be an exact quote, but that pharmaceutical industry has undue influence in what's published in medical journals and medical research, and has also said that you can basically not trust anything that is published in medical journals because of the pharmaceutical industry's influence in the peer review process and in what's published in medical journals.
And some of those were published. I mean, these editors of these journals had stated these things years ago, right? I mean, early 2000s, they were already acknowledging this. So, man, there's so much there. This would be probably another show as well. But when recently you just had, I don't want to deviate too far from this, but recently you just had an event in Kansas City, and you had a beautiful headliner of speakers. Tell us about that event and what happened, my friend.
Yeah. I want to preface this by saying, like, I established Health Freedom for Humanity. Well, first off, I have to say one thing. What I just shared regarding Stefan Lanka is not representative of Health Freedom for Humanity. That is coming from me. But I, again, urge you to do your own research, anyone listening or watching this. Like, you need to go look into everything that I just said, and you'll be surprised when you look. That's what I'll say. But I found the need to show that there seems to also be this narrative amongst the I guess people who accept the COVID narrative, that anyone who questions COVID is a super far right leaning QAnon supporting Trumper conspiracy theorist, right? And there is elements of that are true. Like, of course, there are people who are, like, again, dissenting to the COVID narrative that are that description, right? But the reality is that there are so many people from all walks of life who are also longing for the right to choose what is put into their own body or around their own body with regards to health, right? And I felt the need to really show the world that this movement is uniting people from all walks of life. That the health freedom movement is comprised of people from all races, all religions, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all political affiliations, gender, sexual orientations, and perceptions on health. And we've been really, really effective at doing just that. And for our event in Kansas City, again, we had people from all walks of life there. And it was in downtown Kansas City, in the heart of the city, during a mask mandate. And it was pretty beautiful because we actually had several people who attended our event that were from other places that were wearing masks. And I talked with a few of them because by the end of day one, they had taken their mask off. And day two, they came up to me, and I sort of noticed them. And day two, they came up to me and they were like, there was this one lady from New York. She was like, I was very hesitant to come to this event, but I had a friend tell me that it would change my perceptions on things. So I decided to come, and you probably saw me wearing a mask on day one, but I took it off by the end of the day. And the way you all approached this out of love and kindness, and no one was coming up to me calling me a sheep. No one was saying, take your mask off. None of that. It was just sort of like a live and let live mentality. And I saw everyone just like laughing and loving and hugging each other, and everyone was super healthy. None of them had masks on, and I decided to take mine off as well. And that's what's beautiful, is that the more that we can embody our own perspective, and we don't have to call people blind sheep. And in fact, I think we should never call people blind sheep. If we can just embody our perspective, boldly speak our truth, and people will come to that determination on their own, especially as we continue to empower people to trust themselves, right? Where we have the other side of the spectrum that is telling people, even on their side, you should not trust yourself. You need to blindly trust us. We're the experts here. We know what's best for you. We know what's best for your body. We know what's best for your kids. We know what's best for the health of all of society. If you're on the other side of that, if you're telling people, I want you to trust you, they're eventually going to come around to trusting themselves, which means they're eventually going to come around to understand that their body, self-healing, self-regulating, that they have the healing tools within them, that there's nothing to be afraid of, and that all is well, and that the accepted narrative is clearly fear-based and clearly wrong. But speaking to specifically what happened at our event, so
that's a great explanation too, by the way, to set the stage as to who you are and what you represent and why this is such a clean message. And I appreciate that about you, Alec. So that's great. It's important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, it really is like a spiritual perception that I have, that I've sort of projected onto this organization, along with other people who have formed it who hold the same spiritual perspective. It's that we fundamentally believe that no one should be able to impose their will onto another entity, organization, or individual. And that's in any perspective, anything. And how that looks with health freedom is that, like, we are not Although I personally clearly disagree with vaccines, right? We are not telling anyone not to get the vaccine. We are not telling anyone not to wear a mask. We are telling everyone to trust themselves and determine what's best for their own health, and that everyone should have that inalienable right. So it was also cool because, like, day one of our event, a lot of the people that worked for the city of Kansas City, because it was a Kansas City facility that we were in, like actually owned by the city, were starting to lower their masks and stuff too. And they were like, "Y'all are so kind and loving, and this is just great to see people hugging each other. This is so awesome." But the city health department approached us at 3 p.m. In the middle of day one and said, "Hey, you all are in violation of the mask mandate. We're going to shut you down unless you start complying." And we explained to them that we weren't in violation of the mask mandate because we ultimately know that 21 U.S. Code 360 BBB-3 states nothing approved under emergency use can be mandated. The masks have been under emergency use since 24th April 2020. So we are not an agency that can tell people what to do with regards to mask wearing. We're not telling them not to wear masks. In fact, multiple of our people attending the event are wearing masks, and we're totally okay with that. We're not telling them not to. It's up to each individual to choose. They didn't really like that answer, so they said, "Hey, we're going to shut you down in 2 hours unless you comply." So we said, "We'll get back to you." We go away for a little bit, and we go into this back room, and we had our attorney there with us. Our attorney writes up an 11-page notice and sends it to them and says, "If you do any of these things, we'll pursue legal action against you." They didn't read the notice, and that became very apparent because they responded no more than 30 minutes later, after we had completed that notice and finished out day one. They never came to shut us down in 2 hours like they said they were going to. But then towards the end of day one, we sent out that notice, and it became very apparent that they didn't read it because the city of Kansas City's attorney sent us an email at 10:38 p.m., or like no later than 30 minutes after we had sent them the 11-page notice. Clear they didn't read it because they said, "Event terminated. You were in breach of contract. Event canceled. You can coordinate with your project manager that works for the city to come pick up all of your stuff to get it out of the building," because we had all of our vendor tables, all of our stuff in there. So then we show up the next morning at 6:30, and the doors are locked with signs on them that say "Event canceled. Contact Health Freedom for Humanity for refund information." We get in contact with the city and the city attorney, and then it became very apparent that they did read the notice this time, because although they kicked us out, they became overly accommodating to us. They're like, "Hey, we own a park across the street. Let's go ahead and put you into that park so it can be outdoors. You can still use the bathrooms in this facility. Have all your vendors just take the tables from the outside and set up outside, and you can still do the event outside. We'll get speakers out there. We'll get a microphone out there. It'll be good, and lights so you can go into the night." And so we moved the event outside, and it ended up being 10 times better, because then people who didn't even purchase tickets were walking by, seeing how loving we were. Nobody had political signs. Nobody had any of that stuff. It was just based in uniting people from all walks of life with love, who have a common perception that they have the right to choose what is best for their own health. That's it. We had Black people there, white people there, like Asian people there, gay people, straight people, trans people. We literally had people from all walks of life that were there uniting for health freedom, and it was beautiful. And other people walking by, seeing us, people talk about regenerative agriculture, because we had a whole hour and a half section on with 3 different speakers on regenerative agriculture. People walking by like, "What's this about?" Sitting down and listening to us talk, and coming up to us like, "Wow, this is a beautiful event. Like, this is really refreshing to see. It's not politically charged. It's not this. It's not that." And day 2, being outside, ended up being way, way, way better. And what a perfect opportunity to exercise what we believe in. When society rejects us, we go turn our back to society with love and go start something new and attract members of society who know intuitively that something is wrong and come along with us. And we do so uniting people from all walks of life. And it was a beautiful display of true health freedom.
Man, that's powerful. I got the version that said you guys got shut down and things, you adapted and pivoted. But I love the fact that your attorney sent the 11-page letter. They finally read it, and then they were very accommodating. Accommodating was the was a great way to put it. They were definitely CYA, correct?
Yes.
Covering their own ass, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
But great event.
Very apparent.
And so, are you scheduling any upcoming events?
So We have a live stream event that we're scheduling from December 17th through December 21st. It'll be a 5-day live stream event. And then we also are planning a future event either in March or April. And it was beautiful because, again, this event brought people together in community. And we had people fly into our event from Norway. We had people come from, like, tons of people come from California, tons from Texas, tons from Florida. And right now, the 3 locations we're looking at are Texas, California, or Florida. Very different locations to each other.
Right.
But
Not
we're just trying
not
to
Norway?
not Norway. No. Yeah, maybe Norway, maybe Finland, maybe Antarctica. Trying to spread
Not
the message.
Australia.
Yeah, not Australia. I don't even think I'd be allowed in that country. I'm probably considered a domestic terrorist here, so who God knows what I am in Australia. But yeah, I mean, right now, like, we have 24 state chapters and chapters in 4 countries, and we're expanding pretty rapidly. And we're different than other health freedom organizations. How we have our chapters structured and what we have them focusing on, like other health freedom organizations. And again, like, I want to be clear, this has its place, what I'm about to say. Other health freedom organizations are focused on petitioning the government, asking the government to change, contacting their congressmen, writing letters, signing petitions, asking the government for permission. That has its place. Don't get me wrong. Like, you can decentralize your life completely from the government in all ways, but you can't control if you're in California and they put up a 5G tower right in your front yard. There's nothing you can do about that. Aside from, you need to probably go petition to your local government. You can grow your own food. You can, make yourself completely financially free, have a job that's completely outside the system, do local homeschool co-ops. You can do all those things to decentralize yourself. But if they throw a 5G tower in your front yard, that's something you need to go to your local government about. So these health freedom organizations that are doing that are very effective and have their own little role in this movement, and they're very helpful. But there are so many people focusing on that, and not enough people just focusing on uniting people from all walks of life and creating community to eventually be the foundation for which we birth that parallel society that we need. We need to get more money before we get to that point, but that's our eventual goal. And that's what we're focused on doing. We're not petitioning the government. We're not pleading the government with the government. We're not, contacting our congressmen as part of Health Freedom for Humanity, as part of our local chapters. We are simply uniting people in community from all walks of life, establishing connections. We're that vessel so that people can unite with their local crowd outside of all of those apparent divisions amongst society. And that's what we're doing.
That is powerful, and I am all for it. In fact, I support everything you're doing with that. When we invited you to our Health Freedom Revival, it was about a solution. It wasn't about just a rally. It was about uniting people that felt alone, that felt isolated, that felt like they had questions about their kids in their school. What were they going to do, whether they're in athletics or just the fact of how do we navigate our local school boards and our local county boards to then be able to stand up for our personal rights when they're being bulldozed over. And literally bullied is the word for it. When we look at what you're doing to impact, the most powerful thing, I agree with you, and I love the vision, is just bring people together. The cliche, the government says we're in this together. No, we are not in it together with the government. You and I, my brother, my sisters, the brethren of all walks of life, the underlings, so to speak, other than, I don't even want to use the word elite because they're not. They are not in it with us. We are in it together, you and I, and our communities, and that's where we have to take a stand.
Yeah.
We just had our an event this last weekend, and one of the things we tried to instill, I put a presentation together for the rest of our membership, and that was about just introducing them to what they didn't attend. So many people weren't able to get to the Health Freedom. They don't necessarily know what it was about. And so we literally had that group together to connect with them and say, this is what this is about. And that vision, with plenty of pictures of you in there, by the way, were really crucial so they could understand. Because when AP did that article, which you saw, right? And there's been some great hate mail coming in as a result of standing up for human beings' rights. And the fascinating thing with that, to your point earlier, is that when people when we talk about just confusion. What do you have to believe to make someone with your heart, what you're doing to try to, I'm getting back feedback again.
You can
Maybe
hear
the
it?
volume, yeah.
How about now?
Better. It's there a little bit, but nonetheless, when people don't realize the magnitude of why we're doing this, and what my train of thought was, what does somebody have to believe to make something you're doing that is really unifying all human beings, regardless of their choices, not making anyone wrong, but standing up for those that do want their voice heard and do want to have their own private life, whatever it may be. That person in the hate mail that comes across is like, it's fascinating. Like,
It is.
you have to believe that someone defending someone else is despicable, is a bad person, when it's just fascinating, absolutely amazing to see that divisiveness being employed.
Well, I mean, there's so many layers to this too, right? Because all we are simply saying is on the surface, which even if you don't have the context of any of the information I'm about to share real quickly here, the more data that's packed into this brain, even without any of the context of this, we're simply saying that everyone should have a right to choose what is best for themselves.
When it comes to infrared sauna, the technology at therasage360.com is on the forefront of delivering results safely and effectively. The technology in Therasage 360 is not only affordable and portable, it allows you to access the benefits of infrared technology on any budget. For a 15% discount on all products on Therasage360.com, use code FSDW360. You'll be glad you did.
Like that, like the fact that that is a controversial statement, or that I was born without any of these things, the way that I was created in my mother's womb, and I would like to continue to live without any of these things. Like the fact that that is a controversial statement is crazy, but we've been conditioned to accept that anyone who questions that is crazy, and
Yep.
it's not. And here's the number, or one of there are many things that I could share, but here's a few reasons why, specifically speaking to this. So, given the CDC's own data on COVID, 95% of COVID deaths had an average of 4 comorbidities, most being lifestyle and nutrition related: heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, obesity. That's a CDC data point. 95% of the people who have died from COVID had an average of 4 comorbidities, right? Another CDC data point: 78% of hospitalizations were in overweight or obese people. I've not heard any information, any education or resources poured into, or money poured into lifestyle, nutrition, or mindfulness, given the clear implications of this data. Is it zero? None, right? And it's been 20 months. So if you say, oh, because we're in an emergency, you can turn your health around in 2 months, sometimes 1 month.
Yep.
So it's been 20 months and we haven't heard any mention of that. Or they'll say, oh, we don't have funding for that. The federal government spent $10 billion with a B, $10 billion, to improve vaccine infrastructure and combat vaccine hesitancy. So when you say we don't have any funding, when your own data clearly shows the importance of lifestyle, nutrition, mindfulness, it's absurd. There is no excuse. And then let's add the context of what Pfizer is all about. Pfizer has on multiple occasions paid out upwards of billions of dollars, in one case, $2.3 billion in criminal fines. They have on multiple occasions lied, bribed doctors, falsified data, knowingly caused harm with their products and misled regulators, used Nigerian children as guinea pigs without their parents or the children's consent. This is the company that we are entrusting with our health. And given that criminal record, the fact just on that alone, even if this product was 100% safe and 100% effective, given the context of that alone, the fact that we're even discussing mandating this product as a condition to participate in society is disgusting. And then the fact that there are people out there that are shaming people like you and I, who are simply saying, hey, considering all of this information, we would just like the right to choose. Like, we would like the right to choose. And then let's add another layer on top of that, something I shared with you before we started recording. A new study came out around 3 weeks ago that was looking at if there was any correlation between COVID cases and uptake in vaccines on a global scale. So they studied 68 countries and 2,947 US counties to determine if there is any correlation between that county or that country's uptake in vaccines for COVID-19 and the subsequent COVID-19 cases, right? What that study found was that there was no correlation at all, no discernible trend between countries who had a high vaccine uptake and their subsequent cases for COVID-19. And in fact, if anything, and this is the word choice that they use, like just that you pointed out before you started recording, they said there is a marginally, the fact that they even have to throw in the word marginally is ridiculous, but nonetheless, there's a positive association in that countries who were the most vaccinated had more COVID-19 cases. That is what that study found. That is science. That is a peer-reviewed study. And how come we're ignoring that study, let alone the thousands of experts from all over the world, the thousands of other studies that have been published that are showing that this vaccine is not effective and is also not safe? I mean, with our podcast for Health Freedom for Humanity, I interview people literally every other day. I interviewed one this morning just before we got on this call. I interviewed one 5 days ago who had a seizure mid-episode while we were recording. I'm interviewing people who are injured or know someone who was injured or killed by these shots. And what we keep on hearing regarding the safety of these shots is, oh, VAERS is a passive reporting system. It's inaccurate. We can't trust it because it's passive reporting. Anyone can file a report. They leave out the context that it is a federal offense to falsify a VAERS report. They also leave out the context that the only independent review of the vaccine adverse event reporting system done by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare determined that less than 1% of vaccine adverse events are actually reported. So they hold that to be true, though, that VAERS is a passive reporting system. They can't trust that. They also hold these other things to be true, that any individual stories of vaccine injury or vaccine death that are shared on social media or elsewhere are anecdotal and are not verified and therefore misleading or untrue. I've literally interviewed a number of people now who have been injured by the shot and are literally just sharing their life story on Instagram and have had their accounts deleted when they're sharing what they have experienced after receiving this product. And then third, the other thing that they hold to be true, or that is true, is that they unblinded the placebo group from the clinical trials. So they're not able to track safety that way. So if they say that there's a passive reporting system, that they're not able to track whether vaccine is safe because of the clinical trials, they unblinded the placebo group, allowing them to get the shot. And then they're also censoring and discrediting any anecdotal reports of vaccine injury. How are they effectively determining the safety of this shot? And their answer is they aren't. There is no answer. They're not tracking the safety. Sorry to go off on a tangent there, but it's just absurd that this is the point in history that we're at, where we're literally, without even all that context that I just shared, and there's so much more, just saying we want the right to choose what is best for our own health. That's it.
That's no tangent. The whole topic of conversation here is, where do you start with the slippery slope and the spiral of deceit? Because when people actually even we're asking permission and using the CDC, the FDA, the NIH as resources when they're all private corporations that are in bed with this Marxist setup, right? This fascist setup, where, you know, for those folks who doubt that this is happening, that's when corporations are melded in and blended with government, and that's what that is. And so that's who's now calling those shots and controlling the dissemination. And Alec is simply pointing out from a scientific questioning method, when we even know that Koch's postulate's not being honored in any of these cases with this, and yet it's called science when it's actually pseudoscience. So people that are, you know, follow the science in their yard, I'm not here to blow that up, but here's an example of a conversation this morning, Alec. A patient of mine, and I'll just summarize a story, and it's going to be, I'd like to talk with you on another fun level of this. When we talked about nutrition, we talked about carnivorous type lifestyle and omnivorous lifestyles, okay? And part of my passion with that is helping. Every day I get to help patients solve problems with, whether it's an inflammation, or they'll come in with, let's just say it's a thyroid problem, a weight problem, a low back problem, a neck problem, whether it's numbness, tingling in the hands, not sleeping at night, they're out of balance, adrenal problems, you name it. I get it all across the board: bedwetting, ear infections, respiratory infections, and now this thing called COVID. This gentleman has had 8 surgeries in his musculoskeletal spine. He's had 3 in the low back and 5 in the neck, multiple disc surgeries, discectomies, laminectomies. he was put on a proton pump inhibitor for 25 years. What people don't know about this scenario is that when you try to cover up what's not actually hyperacidity in the stomach, which is indigestion, it's a lack of healthy stomach acid, and you take a proton pump inhibitor, you might alleviate the symptom, but you actually reduce the absorption of protein in the body, which then shows degradation and an increased biological age more than the chronological age. So the premature degeneration of the spine shows up in disc bulging, disc herniation, disc deterioration. A lack of healthy connective tissue is the real answer. So my point for mentioning this is this onslaught of inflammation and breakdown. His wife pushed him in the office. He didn't even want to come, drives over an hour to get to my office one way, spends a little bit of time with me getting adjusted and back on the road again. And he now golfs every day, or not every day, but he golfs 3 days a week. He's been retired several years. He's back in his lifestyle, happy. Well, he comes in today. So I'd been seeing him for a couple of years just for supportive care, and he's just a great dude. And he comes in with this exacerbation. And this exacerbation is, I got pain down my leg, it's in my hip, it's running down my leg, and it's also radiating into my groin. Well, as a chiropractor, I know where that is. And besides the SI being locked up and referring pain to the groin, he's also got numbness and tingling down his left arm and hand. So what do you think the first thing I asked him was?
Did you get the vaccine?
I said, when did you get your booster? He goes, just the other day, Sunday. It's Tuesday. So there's more to the story. He was already doing some work, but here's the thing, and we talked about this a while ago. So I am not anti, and you know that. I am pro-informed consent. I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-individual. I work for my patient. I don't work for anyone else. I work for them. I don't work for an insurance company. I don't work for pharma. I work for the patient. That means I have to deliver results. And I have a referral practice. So I needed a moment with this guy because he's worked so hard to restore his balance and his health. We've got his gut cleaned up. He's off all PPIs. I mean, that's why he's doing well, is because we cleaned it up and we helped his diet, and then he stays balanced. But now this inflammatory onslaught, the byproduct of a cytokinic storm, which is, this is the clinical side of what happens when that Alec is giving you guys great feedback on, look, this stuff doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. And he's showing scientifically why it doesn't make sense. And it can be overwhelming listening to him. But from a clinical side, I get to see increased inflammation, all the challenges that patients have had before that we've had under control, and their lifestyle was good and they're doing great, all of a sudden are lighting up like a Christmas tree. And they're finding themselves rebattling things that we had solved a while ago. Every one of these cases isn't like that, but honestly, patients do understand this. And the conversation I had with him was and basically I put it this way, and out of respect, whatever you do, I'll support you. But what you're not being told is that every time you get something like this, your body's going to have to respond to it, and you're never going to know how it's going to respond. And by the way, it's actual gene therapy, not an actual vaccine. So with that conversation, this guy was brilliant. He knew it. I mean, when he started to hear it, he just knew. He's like, thank you so much. I said, look, I want to just reiterate where I'm coming from. Whatever you decide to do is okay with me. I just think you need to know both sides before you keep taking these steps, because it's not going to end. Yeah. And you and I both know that. It's from booster to the next variant, to the next title, to the next whatever it's going to be.
We're already seeing that in Israel, right? Like, that's what we're already seeing happen in Israel. They're already looking at third and fourth boosters. That's what they're doing. I mean, it's not going to end. It's going to keep on going. I mean, the more we continue to expose the flaws in the foundational principles of allopathic medicine and of virology and vaccinology, the more that it has to double down its methods and have tighter top-down control. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep it from crumbling by like trying to repair or like add more on top as the foundation is crumbling underneath them. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to make it so that we can no longer break down the foundation. They're removing our ability to show the foundation is flawed. The foundation is flawed. That's what they're trying to do right now. And they're going to keep doubling down, which is why this issue is so unbelievably important right now. It's like Dr. Ben Tapper says, the time is now.
The time is now, my friend. We have to wrap up. I know you got a busy day. Are we okay on time yet?
Yeah, like 5-10 more minutes.
Okay, cool. So I want to ask you a couple questions regarding maybe a segue into another show with you at some point. It doesn't have to be real soon either, but I know it's a passion of yours because you're about freedom. And then how do we maintain them once we still have some left here, right? What do we do moving forward? And after talking with Alec a couple times on this topic, we were both he was surprised that I was aware of it, but the common law aspect. And what does that mean when we start to move forward with regaining? At our convention this weekend, we had one of our speakers, which I won't say, but it was like giving back the power to the people. And I found it fascinating that the word giving was involved. There we have it, folks, and that's where we need to step into what's already there, but it seems an illusion. All right. So it's not like we have to be given anything or allowed to. We already have it. No one is stepping up and stepping into it. So my point for bringing this up is I don't want to sit here and be negative about what's going on out there. I want to talk about what are we doing about it? What are we going to do to what I didn't say do to. What are we going to do to get us forward and unite like Alec is doing? Folks, I would love hearing feedback, but what are we going to do moving forward? Because Alec needs support as he gets deplatformed from all these different social media. I mean, he's told me story after story.
I'm on my 8th Instagram account right now. It's absurd. It's absurd. And well, I mean, that's
so
at the
creative.
core of
Look
my
at you.
message, right? Like,
you're not giving up.
No, and the core, yeah, I'm not giving up. No way. No way. I'm gonna keep coming back. Because I mean, like, if we just continue to only use our like alternative platforms, we're never gonna reach the people that need to be reached, right? The process, I won't even say of taking back your power. The process is of uncovering what you have put on top of the conditioning in this life that conditions us to believe that we are powerless or that we get our freedom from government, right? One thing that's important about the Constitution is not the document of the Constitution itself. That is just a document. I know a lot of people are very big on the Constitution says this, you're trampling my constitutional rights. But the reality is the Constitution is but a document that they can trample. When you understand that the Constitution, the most important piece about it is it discusses how we have inalienable God-given rights. It's not that the Constitution is important, it's what it is referring to. The inalienable God-given rights is what is important. And that's what we all have. We've been conditioned to believe, especially through this last 20 months, that freedom is something that we have to ask the government for, that we have to petition the government for. Give me back my freedom. No. Freedom is here right now inside of you. You are fundamentally free by virtue of existing. And it's always there. You've been conditioned to consent and to give that away. Or I won't even say give it away, to cover it up and not understand who and what you are. So it's a very spiritual process, which is why I'm always empowering people to trust their own observations, experiences, and intuition, because at the least that will lead them down the path of doing the inner work to understand that freedom is ever present and it is within them, and they are free by virtue of existing. Now, how do we exercise that? So what that looks like is when with employer mandates, and again, I have to say off the bat that this is not legal advice. So you look into this yourself and determine if this is best for you. But with employer mandates, there's statements of conditional acceptance or notices of conditional acceptance where you can put it back on your employer to have it to where they are now liable for you receiving this product, and they're not going to sign off on that. So what that looks like is like something to the effect of, I will receive this product, or I accept to receive this product under the following conditions. 1, you can prove that this product is medically necessary for me. 2, you can show me the evidence that there is a health threat. And you could even go into virus isolation with that. You can show me the evidence that there is an actual health threat present that necessitates me receiving this product. 3, you can prove I will not be harmed by receiving this product. 4, you can show me, or you can prove, or you agree to incur any financial harm if I am harmed by receiving this product. And you give that to the human being in front of you who's telling you must receive this, not to your employer, not addressed to XYZ business, addressed to the actual human being so that they are personally getting this letter.
Not Bob, not Bob the supervisor.
Okay, the power is in my hands now because I am free. And if you're saying I need to do this to be free, then you as a person need to show me why I need to do this, and you need to agree to these conditions right here. Or you can press a claim against your business for committing a trespass against you, trespass by way of attempted murder, even if you want to, because you can show very clear evidence that people are dying as a result of these things. And that's where you have to take the power back in your own hands. And it's a fundamental shift in perception. And maybe we'll have to do an entire episode on that topic. But it starts with the understanding that right now you are free. You are free. And if everyone, like if each of us focused on that right there and focused on empowering others, even those who cannot see, empowering them to understand, like, look, you are your body is self-healing, self-regulating. You are powerful. You're so powerful. Please trust yourself. Because when you get people, even the ones who are so blinded right now, to trust themselves again, and they realize they weren't trusting themselves, their own observations and experiences. I mean, over the last 20 months, I would argue that 99 times out of 100, if you turn people back to what they've actually experienced in reality, they will come to the conclusion that, holy shit, what the media is telling me is diametrically opposed to what I've been experiencing. Why haven't I been trusting myself? If we can focus on doing that, this will all end. And it won't end with the system changing. It'll end with people turning their backs to the system because they realize what the system is about. And that's how this ends, and that's how we form the new society that is beneficial to all people. It starts with you, and it starts with empowering others to understand it's with them as well.
Beautiful. And yes, it is another episode, and it would be appropriate to go through that. Now, would you call those declinations notice of liability, a combination?
Notice of liability and notice of conditional acceptances. That's what I would look into. And there's some templates that are floating around, but I personally think you need to make it a personal statement. So I'm not huge on the templates. I think you need to determine, okay, like me as a free person, if this person is telling me, or not me as a free man, if this other human being as a free man or free woman is telling me that I need to do these things in order to receive compensation for my labor, then I need them to go through these steps and tell me that they will agree to these terms. So people need to form that within themselves, and they can use what I've just said as guidance. And again, this is not legal advice. Everyone has to look into this for themselves.
And I would agree with Alec on that. I've come across through several different credible resources, one being Alphonse too. Fagiolo. Agent J's declination, which was brilliant and done really well. But I would also agree 100% with Alec in that you have to own what you're writing and understand what you're actually stating in that, so you can stand behind it and ride it through the end. It is not a bluff. It's something you need to follow through on and accept that when they deny it, that you're going to go through with this and that you actually enforce what you're saying you're going to enforce, and understand that instead of cowering. But there's been some great success with it. And yes, I'm not an attorney either. I'm not recommending that as legal advice, but I'm here to empower people to step up into their own, as Alex stated, they're already power that they've been avoiding and conditioned to not realize that you have. So, dude, you're a powerful young man, and I appreciate you sharing your time and talents with us. Where can people find you, as you are an elusive creature being taken off and put on and taken off? You come up as so-and-so, and the next guy is
I can't name the amount of podcasts I've been on this last year where I tell where people can find me, and then the host of the podcast reaches out to me 2 weeks later and is like, "Hey, my followers are saying they're having trouble finding you," and I'm like, "Yeah, I've been deleted again." So yeah. So okay. The only place
I'll just put up my cell number. How's that? Because then I'll get hold of you.
Throw up my cell phone. Not that I already don't get enough messages on my cell. So I have not been deleted on Twitter yet, which is huge. So you can find me on Twitter at Alec_Zeck, or more importantly is my Telegram channel right now. And that's t.me/the way forward. And then forward on the way forward is spelled FWRD. So t.me/the way forward.
Okay, so let's make sure we're clear on this too. Alec is not here representing Health Freedom for Humanity, which is one of his podcasts, and then his individual podcast, which is also fantastic. I'm going to refer you folks to that as well. Alec is as you know, he's fun to listen to, but I mean, just a passionate young guy who's bright. There it is, The Way Forward. So you can find him on iTunes, Stitcher, I'm sure, all over the media. Yep. He's not been banned with that. So anything else you want to add, brother? Parting words?
No, man, I think I talked quite a bit, quite enough. I guess just you have the power within you.
Awesome. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate you. Thanks for taking the time.
Love you, man.
We'll talk to you soon. Yeah, well, love you too, brother. Ciao. Okay, my fellow health warriors, it's time to head over to iTunes, franklyspeakingdrwade.com. There, you can rate, review, and subscribe, as well as share, so more of our brothers and sisters can grow to realize their voice and their health freedom. Speaking up means you matter, so get on it. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements or views expressed are not medical advice and are not meant to replace the advice of your medical doctor. This podcast, including Dr. Wade Anderson and his guests, disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects you may experience from the specific use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse and accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about the guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for such services or products. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical condition, consult your licensed physician.